Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And y'all, we are so excited for this episode. We're bringing back a friend of the show, fellow podcasters who do the work of preserving women in history. Yes, it is What's Her Name podcast, hosts and creators Olivia and Katie. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Great to be here.
Can you introduce yourself to our listeners or reintroduce?
Hi, I'm Olivia Mickle, and with my history professor sister co-host, Katie, we're the hosts of What's Her Name podcast. What's Her Name podcast, Katie?
So I'm Katie, and Olivia and I are sisters in real life, and I guess that's how we ended up doing the podcast. Olivia is a professor of women's and gender studies, so I guess a women's history project was inevitable at some point. And for, I think it's 8 years, we've been telling the
8 years, which is
stories,
nuts.
of women from world history, putting women back in world history.
Yes, and I love that. Now, it feels like it's been forever ago, and I realized when I was looking back on our episode with you, Olivia, because I know, Katie, you couldn't join us at that time. It was April 2020. Things were happening. Things were happening. It was the beginning of our home recording journey for all of us, I believe. I remember being in the kitchen because I didn't know where else to go, and now we've kind of upgraded to closets or attics for Katie. And I was just like, wow, this feels like forever ago because it was almost 5 years. And you came to us talking about Harriet Jacobs and Noor Jahan. And we had connected because we were on lists together. And we're like, yeah, obviously we need to be interacting and having each other on the podcast. Duh. But it's been a minute. So let me ask you the dreaded question. How have y'all been?
I think the short answer is good.
Question mark? Yeah.
I think we're doing well.
Well,
it seems,
one of the awesome things is to see how in the past 5 years, 8 years, I suppose, it's been a great surprise to see how eager the world is to hear the stories of women in history. And when we started the podcast, we had no idea that we could tell you the origin story. But, the short version is I wanted to do a podcast about the forgotten women of history. And Olivia was like, nobody's going to listen to that.
I was deeply cynical, yes.
And I guess rightly so. She was like, it's hard enough to convince people to listen to stories about the already famous women. It's hard enough to get them to care about that. And I wanted to do women nobody had ever heard of, and who's going to listen to that. But so the great takeaway for us is people want to hear about it. Millions of downloads later, people are ready and eager and excited, and there are listeners all over the world who are just eating this stuff up. So in that way, it's just been really wonderful.
Yeah, I've never been so happy to be wrong.
We love that. And with all of that, the origin stories and where we are today, can you give us an update on what has been going on in the world of What's Her Name?
Gosh, we have been busy.
We wrote 4 books.
Just finished the 4th.
It's the book I've wanted to write since I was 7, so I'm very excited about it. And it comes out this fall. But we wrote 3 other ones we can talk about.
A couple books for middle grade books. We've written the Book of Sisters, which is a history of the world through the stories of sisters, illustrated by 38 different female illustrators from all over the world. That was just such an amazing project.
Amazing.
And then probably the work I'll be proudest of till the day I die, A Stinky History of Toilets, which is a richly illustrated, really disgusting history of poop around the world.
Yeah. Which every time the illustrations came back, or every time a new layout came back, my husband would just kind of look at it and go, I can't believe they're letting you get away with this.
So much poop. But then we finally wrote something for grown-ups, and it is a history of the world in 80 lost women, and it's just a complete as you can be, history of the world from the beginning of time to the modern era, told through the stories of 80 women that nobody's ever heard of.
Because, like, what if women were there the whole time?
Surprise.
It's a bold proposition, but I think we proved it.
Controversial for sure. Yes, and as I was like, we were researching through your work, and I popped up onto the two children's books. I was like, this is amazing. First and foremost, both of them, because it was the poop one, the toilet one, the stinky history of toilets was a surprise. I didn't realize. I was like, well, damn. Yeah. Look at that. I like this. But of course, I love the Book of Sisters, the two of you being sisters and writing this together and loving this journey, seeing Korean sisters, legends being mentioned in there. I got a little excited. I was like, oh, look at that. That's sad. Both of those things. It was like, oh, yeah.
And that was a wild ride trying to tell that story for children. Because I don't know if you're familiar with the whole story, but it is.
It's gnarly.
It's not a PG story.
Right. They made horror movies.
Maybe my biggest writing challenge ever was, how am I going to tell this story in a way that doesn't traumatize everyone and get us fired?
Did y'all watch the horror movie based on that, just out of curiosity?
No. Have you seen it?
Oh, no, I just recently, I can't watch horror movies.
Oh, okay. Well, it got awards because it's so like in-depth. But we'll talk about that later. That's besides the point.
I'll make my kids watch it and they can tell me all about it.
Perfect.
We have our other sister is obsessed with horror films. She's watched everyone in the world.
I'm sure she's seen it,
I'm sure
actually. She has...
We'll ask her for the PG
version. The PG version. I think you did a good job with the PG version. Like, you kind of melted it down. I was
very impressed with myself. Yeah,
it was good. And the art is gorgeous. And for your newer book that has been released, What's Her Name? A History of the World in 80 Lost Women. It's really also amazing. And I really love the layout. It was nice to see because we kind of had similar ideas I think on that same level, like, let's make it interactive. Let's have them kind of be a part of this. And you're asking questions and you're getting polls of people's opinions. And I loved so much of that. So with that, you kind of explained about this book, but can you go into more depth about what this book is about?
We were approached to write a book based on the podcast. And immediately I thought, what would make it fun for me? What would make an interesting challenge? And I've taught world history at university for 11 or 15 years, something, I don't know how long, for a long time. And I just immediately thought, what would be such an interesting challenge? Could I tell a complete history of the world, by like academic standards of what you need to know after you come out of a world history course? Could I teach a history of the world using only the stories of forgotten women? And immediately I was like, oh, now that sounds fun. That sounds intriguing. And it turned out that it was even easier than I thought it was going to be, that it was not difficult to find women's stories that either are emblematic of a moment in time or women who played some hugely significant role in different moments in time from the Stone Age all the way through the present day. So I guess that was the beginning of it. And then for a good year, was it a full year? Maybe longer, Olivia?
Yeah. That's a theme with our work, is that we get offered a project and then we say, how about instead of that project, we do this other, much more complicated, much more difficult, much more time-consuming, we don't even know if it's possible project instead. I kind of go, sure.
Sounds about right.
Okay. But yeah, this one it turned out so great. I'm so proud of it.
And I think it was because of my experience in the classroom. I wanted to make it interactive, like you said, because that's how you get the class engaged. You don't just say, here are the facts, memorize them and spit them back at me on the exam. You say, here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. Here are the different really sound theories that have a lot of academics that agree with them. Which one do you think? So you get to pick as you go. And like you said, there's a lot of like checklists. You choose, how do we explain this phenomenon? And every one of the possible options in the checklist every one of them is a sound academic theory that's supported by hundreds or thousands of different, professors and academics, but you get to choose. So it's, kind of like taking you for a ride through history, but it's a choose your own adventure of world history.
Well, you did that. You actually did a choose your own adventure in part of this. And I was like, we wanted to do this. They did it. That's amazing. I was envious and very excited.
And that's how history should be, I think, that there's so many different stories. You get to choose which ones resonate with you and which ones you want to construct the storyline from. That's what makes it so fun. I'm not of the school of memorize these facts and then spit them out on an exam. That's the way you do history wrong, I think.
Well, it's true.
I especially like that approach just because I got very politely kicked out of an anthropology degree for that very thing, for refusing to pick a side, for refusing to choose one option and insist that it was the right one. And they were like, you have to choose. You can't say, well, we don't know. So I'm now very pleased that I was right. And even anthropology is coming around now too. We don't know. We pretended we knew for a long time, but it could be any of these options.
Right. Forward thinking.
Answers are boring to me. I always prefer questions. I will take better questions over answers in any situation. So it's fun to force people to adopt that theory of looking at history.
Yeah, I mean, it can be frustrating sometimes as a podcaster when I'm like, I want to find the answer and you think it exists in history, and it's like, no. We don't know. Yeah. We have no idea.
I love to fill in the gaps and invent my own. I mean, I will construct the plot line in my head and I'll say, this is the way it went in my head. So I will land somewhere, but also allow other people to land in different places if they want to construct. They want to fill in the gaps in a different way.
And my favorite thing about history is that you can be 100% sure you know what happened. We know what happened here. And even though this happened 1,000 years ago, tomorrow we might find something that means that everything we knew was wrong. And I love that you can be still discovering completely new information about things that happened thousands of years ago.
Yeah, that's amazing. We have a segment on this show called Female First, and it's astounding to me how they'll be like, just a couple years ago, we learned something about this that changed everything.
Yes.
So with all of that in mind, it's daunting enough to write a book. Then you've got all this complicated history. Can you tell us about the writing process that went into this? The writing and research, how did that play out?
Initially, I think, because I'm the world historian, the job was mine to at least lay out the big picture outline. So what I did first was sit down and say, okay, so what are the major episodes of world history that I want to make sure we include that are in the book? So I outlined all of those from the Stone Age to the modern era. Okay, we need to have this episode. We're definitely going to need something from 19th century China. I mean, that was this whole show. So we definitely need something from there, just those major episodes. Had that outlined. And then we looked at all the episodes we had already recorded and thought, and sort of slotted some of those in. Oh, this tells this is a great Neolithic story, so we'll slot her in there. And then where there were gaps where we hadn't had episodes of particular moments in time, that's when the research began to go research in more depth, for example, like 9th century Africa, in order to see what women's stories were going on there. So there was some new and in-depth research in some areas, and then in other areas it was like, oh, we already have like 12 episodes about this episode, so this moment in history, so we'll have to narrow it down and choose just one or two of the women to tell this story. So that was kind of the big picture process. And then we just went through chronologically. We wrote it chronologically over the course of a year and would give ourselves deadlines at the end of every month. We have to have, it was a chapter a month, basically. And then because we literally co-wrote it, using the same document, it was on Google Docs that we both had access to. And we were just in there sort of typing and having a conversation with each other in the Google Doc as we went.
And she's very politely not saying that we had deadlines, but I nearly gave her a nervous breakdown. Because
she did.
I was having a rough year, and I am not great on deadlines at the best of times, and it was bad. And bless her for putting up with me.
The farther you get into the book, because we wrote it chronologically, the farther you get into the book, the more of it I wrote. Because
the more of Katie.
Yeah. But we finished it. We did it.
And here's my PSA to the world. Don't write 2 books at the same time. Don't ever agree to write 2 books at the same time.
How?
It's not the full excuse for how.
But it's part of the excuse.
Well, congrats on finishing it.
Yeah.
And, Samantha and I can relate so much to all of this. If we ever get to hang out in person, we could.
We need to give tales, trade secrets.
Yes. Of the book writing process and deadlines and all of that. But one thing that I think that we could probably really relate to is the difficulty of choosing who you're going to feature and what you're going to do. So for us, it was a little different because ours was, I think, more condensed in terms of who we were featuring. But it did feel like by featuring someone, you're leaving someone else out. And what are you saying by choosing this person and not this person?
Yes.
So how was that for you, and how did you choose the people you were going to feature?
That's a great question that only somebody who has been through it would know to ask.
And we went out of our way to make a big point of that in the intro of this is a history. It is a history. It is not the history. And we could write this book with 80 different women, and it would be every bit as accurate and true to history and be a completely different story. The idea that there's only certain people in history that matter that should be included is ridiculous, and that you can tell it so many different ways. And so I get lots of people, I'm sure you get the same, that assume that our main problem in writing and podcasting everything is finding enough women. Aren't you going to run out of women soon? Which is still mind-blowing to me. No, in fact, there have been more than 151 women in the whole history of the world who did something.
Surprise.
But the problem is always the opposite of, we started with 320 women and had to keep cutting it down. And, our publishers were like, you cannot go over 100. You must keep it under 100.
And I think, so I made sure to sort of address that in the introduction. And then at the conclusion again, as you said, Olivia, what I find wonderful about history is that there is no set cast of main characters, and that history is like this treasure trove of human stories and truths that you can just dive into again and again. It's almost endless, all the stories that have been lived before. And all the things people have learned and done in the past. And so what's so beautiful about history is that every time you find a new person, you find a new truth that they lived or that they learned. And so the beauty is keep on diving in, keep on finding new characters, write another story with a different cast and see how that story plays out. So I mean, you couldn't blame people for believing there is a fixed cast of main characters, because that's what we were taught in school. And that's how the textbooks make it seem, there was this important person, and if you left that person out, you wouldn't have the complete history, or, things like that. But it's just, the more I teach world history, the more I know that's just not true, and that the bigger stories always involved millions of people, and you could tell that that episode through any one of those people who lived it. It's sort of like switching cameras in a movie, you know? You can tell the same story, but from this perspective, now switch to this perspective or this perspective. And every time you add more characters, it makes the story so much more interesting. It comes alive in completely new ways. So it can be painful to choose the characters, but as long as in doing that, you show people like, wow, this story is totally fascinating and different in new ways now, then maybe we can all realize that we could choose all kinds of different people from history. And it doesn't mean that we're ignoring or erasing the other ones. It just means we're switching cameras to look at it in new ways. I think that's the way we're headed. I even think that's the way textbooks are headed, the way that things have been evolving in the last 10 years in academia.
Yeah, I love everything that was said because Anney was talking about the fact that we were like, oh, we don't want to exclude anybody. We want to bring everybody in. And then our editors were like, no. We have to cut this. We have to cut this and this. And I'm like, but why? But there's so much to that in knowing that if there was a very small choice in finding women, it's not because they're not there. It's because either A, they haven't been discovered, or B, they've been hidden, or the history has tried to erase them. But I love that as more and more content creators, more and more professors like yourself, and more people coming out discovering or retelling these stories. And that's exactly why books like this are so important. But, you know, at the very top, when you were talking about the book, you did say something about you knew you had to include these specific people. So with that, who are some of these people you're like, yeah, before we even write this book, I know these are the people I want to include. Who were they and why?
And why? Yes, exactly. Just to speak generally, some of them are like, we personally love them so much that they have to go in because like, this is my personal hero or something like that. And then other times I think I felt really strongly about choosing this or that woman because to use the same metaphor, the shift of cameras totally changes the way that we perceive the event. And the one that springs to mind for me is including in talking about the story of the cult of liberty and the American Revolution and, you know, that whole entire episode in history where the camera is usually on Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and, you know, those characters. If you shift the camera to the enslaved woman who is in the room while they're all sitting around the dining room table talking about liberty and how are we going to pull this off while a slave is serving them, you know, at their dining room table, shift to her. How does she see the event and how does it all play out for her? Well, that completely, I mean, that just blows wide open the whole story of the American Revolution in the most enlightening and amazing way. So it was those kind of camera shifts too that were like, we have to do this because it's just so brilliant when you shift cameras like that in these episodes.
Yeah. I mean, an obvious one for me that I know for when we did episodes on them, we just kept going, how did we not know any of this? How are we not talking about this? What was the fact that I'll insert the academic, arguably, but definitely the two most important figures in the Spanish colonization of what is now Mexico are women who no one outside of Mexico has ever heard of. They're more important than Cortez. They're more important than, I mean, they are the key to that entire era of history, to what happens, to how it happens, to, you know, the fundamental shift in how the world behaves toward the new world. And nobody even talks about them, which is ridiculous. It's absurd. And whenever I tell people, you know, I just sort of casually mention, oh, by the way, did you know that? And their minds are blown and they're angry. They're angry that this was never told, even though everyone at the time knew. They were talking about it at the time. It's not like nobody knew she was there. You know, Malincine is central in every picture of Cortez interacting with anybody. And yet we just pretend some woman, I don't know. We don't know why there's a woman there that's the biggest person in the entire picture. And Cortez is standing behind her as a little shrimpy, you know, nothing.
I love that you come in with like a party conversation with this. Did you know?
Oh, I'm very annoying to be around, I'm sure. I am never not on my soapbox. I try really hard.
Yeah. Crowded bus, just standing next to someone and be like, so what do you know about the conquest of Mexico in 1521?
This is the information I would want to know.
Yeah.
My 18-year-old pointed out to me a couple months ago just how ridiculous I am in a good way. He was laughing with love. But this was an entirely normal interaction to me, but we were just driving along somewhere in the car and we're just silent. And all of a sudden I said, "So, do you want to hear my most controversial archaeological opinion?" And and he just burst out laughing. And I couldn't even, for a minute, I was like, why is he laughing? And then I went, oh, that is probably a weird conversation starter for a mother and her teenage child in a car. And he just started laughing. He's like, "You're so weird. I love it." And then we talked, for an hour about our most controversial archaeological opinions. And so, yeah, we're nerds to the core. And that's where I think all of this comes out of true nerdy passion, right?
Yes.
All of this, we're so excited about it that you can't help, I hope, but also be excited about it when you are reading or hearing us enthuse.
Teaching the next generation to have that conversation as well. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
That's what a good parent does. So great job.
Yeah. He did apparently go to school and tell everyone about my most controversial archaeological opinion. So
I love it, sharing it. This is how we spread history. Well, let's look behind the curtains a little bit in this writing process, because we talked about the people you did include. So was there something you had planned at the beginning in this writing or for the book, but changed as you were in the process of writing it?
Yeah, quite a bit.
lots.
The list of women who were included changed as we went pretty regularly. And it was funny because we had already given the list to our editor because he'd sent it on to their promo team, and they were using it to send the book out to different countries, all those kinds of things. And then we'd be like, oh, well, the list has actually changed now. So now it's these people, and then a month later, okay, we've had to take her out because we realized we really need to tell this story instead. So now this woman is included in. So it was,
We had a
I'm sure they were
giant
annoyed. It was
spreadsheet
constantly tweaking.
Of era and region and theme and story, just every possible cross-reference category.
We really wanted to make sure that we were choosing as diverse a group as we possibly could in all ways, including geographical and time period and what kind of a story are they telling. Is this an athlete? Is this a politician? Is this an artist? All of those things that we were working really hard to make sure that we had representation from all those different categories. So it was a endless juggling, I think. And that's why I think at the end we said if we'd chosen a different 80 women, the story would be enlightening in a new way. It would be a very different story. I think that would be really fun, even a game, which it would be the world's nerdiest board game. But
I was going to say, once again,
randomly select these women and then construct a story that links them all together across time and across the world. Oh, I think that would be so fun.
Next 4th of July barbecue.
Right? Yeah.
That is genuinely the kind of thing we do at family gatherings with our family. We're like, let's construct this timeline, or let's go through the slideshow of the history of the Ottoman Empire at the 4th of July. We're weirdos. It's great. Yeah, there was one woman who we decided to sub out for someone else and then found out that they had put her on the cover. So we had to put her back in, which I was happy with because I love her. But it was she's on the cover now. I guess she better be back in.
Yeah.
That's so relatable. We've had things where we're like, I think we mentioned them, but we never mentioned them again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been there.
Yes. There's a lot of moving parts when writing a book, for sure.
So many. Yeah.
The cover, we've learned, is very important.
Yeah. And initially the illustrations, because the Venus of Willendorf is in the book, and the illustration of the Venus, which I personally loved, the illustrator of the cover is Ellen Winata in Singapore. And her illustration of the Venus of Willendorf is just gold. I loved
incredible.
it. And that was on the cover originally. And then somebody took the Venus off the cover. And then, for me, that was like, no, she was going to be if she was on the binding, she was going to be the icon of the book. And then she wasn't. Maybe somebody was like, it was boobs.
Maybe they'll let us buy her and put her on a t-shirt. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
Merch idea.
Who knows?
So we can write books full of poop for children, but no ancient boobs.
But
on
no
a book for
Stone
adults.
Age. Stone
The
boobs.
rules of publishing are strange.
Very.
I am. Speaking of merch, though, now that you mention it, look, I'm wearing a shirt. This is one of the new shirts that we made from it's just got a line from the book. Less patriarchy, more elephant.
I love that.
That's one of the options when you take the ancient empires test. Which empire would you have lived in? That's one of the options. If your personality is less patriarchy, more elephant, then it turns out you lived in ancient Vietnam. So yeah, Olivia really wanted that line on a t-shirt.
It has to be on a t-shirt.
I love it.
With no context, right? Just
Yes,
that's the best.
that's the best way.
And then the people who know will know. You'll bond.
Those who know. Exactly. Love it.
We have one I still want to do. Unfortunately, I think there will be balls. One day.
I remember that. Yes. I would buy that on a shirt.
It's from our Sex and the City episode.
It's from our Sex and the City episode.
I remember that distinctly.
Well, during all of this research, did you run across anything that really surprised you or something that you discovered that you hadn't heard before, even doing all this research?
Constantly.
Constantly, yeah. And that's the whole story of the podcast, too. For 8 years, we're just constantly encountering stuff we had never heard of. Almost every episode, these women we've never heard of also. And I guess that's what so makes the podcast so fun for us. It's going to school. We're still in school 8 years later, and our general strategy is, people who've written biographies will approach us to be on the podcast, and then we learn about the woman that way. But we also like to just approach experts in all fields, all over the world, and just say to them, is there a woman in your field that you think deserves more attention than she gets? And they always say yes. Always. And it's almost always a woman we've never heard of either. So yeah, every episode we make is so fun for us because we get to deep dive into this story that we'd never heard of either. So, I mean, as people who have taught the subject for a decade, that is so thrilling and so encouraging, I think. There's just so much out there. The work is being done. It is absolutely being done. Up to 11. There is so much out there. And like I said, the world is ready for it. I think all these books are being published. All these people are working on these projects. So we're like right on the cusp of it entering the mainstream historical narrative. And I think for the next generation, the story is going to be radically different. It's going to be awesome.
Because I think that is right. That's the power that is sometimes recognized, usually not recognized about teaching, is that you're setting the normal, right? That we all came up through. When I was a women's studies undergrad, the narrative was women didn't do stuff. It wasn't their fault. They weren't allowed to, but mostly they didn't do stuff. And there was this kind of feeling that you were sort of shoehorning women into the story. Well, you're just trying to go find a woman so that she wasn't as good or she didn't do things. And that was the women's studies people narrative, right? It wasn't their fault, but they just didn't. And so watching it shift as everyone went, oh, no, in fact, women were always doing stuff. All you have to do is kind of poke a tiny bit and they just come pouring out. It's not like you're having to go, dig through layers of stuff to find the one woman you could possibly maybe justify. There's so many stories constantly just, falling out of every pocket of the universe whenever you start looking for them. And I love that the problem is we're having to say no, right? We're having to just say no to whole categories. We can't do any more of this, and we have too many white Americans, and we can't do another white American for a year, or, you know, that we're having to, you know, turn down things instead of go searching for things is a wonderful problem.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much. And speaking of searching for things, you talk about legendary goddesses and mythical women in both of your books, the sister book and in the newest book. And here we talk about a lot of goddesses and legends, but we also talk about the undertones that is often either is based on some awful stereotype, or sometimes it's like really banking on the fact that they did so much. So you have this like almost two opposites when it comes to legendary goddesses and or all of these people. Can you talk about what you found as you were researching for your podcast and as you were researching for your book that kind of talks about and how it implies how they saw women in those like goddess peoples?
It's still my favorite part in the whole book. Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, that mythology matters. These core stories that we carry in our culture inform everything, the way we think about everything. But also, we often tend to act the same way about like that, well, these myths are old, and therefore this is the myth, this is the story. And you'll get accused of trying to, you know, change it, or why are you being, you know, you're trying to PC up this myth, when myths are as malleable as anything else. The myths that you choose, the way you tell them, the things that you highlight in those stories are as flexible and as movable as any other story. And that if you look at the way, even like the standard Greek mythology that every American kid learns in junior high, if you look at the way that was taught in my parents' generation versus my generation versus what my kids were learning in high school, it's so radically different. And it's all the same content, but just the framing of it is so different. And so I think, you know, we have these narratives around, like, one that I really liked taking on in there was the myth of the mother, that the good mother, and you know, we have this nurturing mother myth, which, you know, in the 90s, and then again right now, I think a lot of people are pulling back to, and we have this kind of earth mother nurturing thing, which is true and great and wonderful. And also there's the exact opposite, and every shade of gray in between is available in mythology, and often in the same stories. And just how we decide to tell it. Is this story about a nurturing, loving earth mother, or is this story about a terrifying goddess of death? Yes, at the same time. And so when you realize how much you can shift those framings around, and how you can make those stories do work in the present, you recognize the way those mythologies are being either weaponizing or even just, you know, utilizing these stories.
Like I said, the camera shift. Yeah, they're just looking at it with certain filters. Yeah.
Yeah. And that you can and should, and we always have and always will do that. Shift the way you're looking at these core stories, and that they can mean whatever people now decide they want them to mean. And that can be, you know, good or bad or value neutral, but you need to be aware that these aren't just, you know, core mythologies that you can't mess with. But no, of course you mess with them. That's what mythologies are for. Everybody has always messed with them.
Well, with that, since you love this, I did see like a few crossovers, but who would be your favorite mythological goddess that you love to talk about? Or
oh, geez.
Is that too big of a question?
Favorites. Ooh.
I know. I gotta ask.
Because I get, like, you know, I'm sure you do it too. People are like, what's your favorite? And you think of one, and then later you're like, oh, I forgot like 6 that I would have. Yeah.
Right.
Because we were saying we can't even remember what we wrote.
I know. I love the Mesopotamian Inanna and that story of...
Yes.
What happened?
Wild.
She turned her sister into a chunk of meat and hung her on the wall.
Rotten meat, and let her rot on the wall.
I just, as sisters, we can relate, you know.
Interesting choice.
But I love those kind of plot twists in the ancient myths. It's like, weird. What a weird. I don't think anybody today would think of that kind of plot element. Yeah, I love those.
Right. Which tells us that we're definitely not understanding it, right? There's something happening there that we're not understanding. The
Some
way
kind
that
of big
they were
cultural truth about meat hanging on the wall or something like that. Yeah. I love the Morrigan. She's got to be my favorite.
Of course. Someday that's going to be my Halloween costume.
Ooh. I love it.
She's amazing.
Anyway, did you choose it?
Yeah, I think for me, they're in actually 2 of our books because they're so, I think, brilliant, and they are so interesting in that the story itself is doing that work that I was just talking about of changing the framing and pointing out
that you can see something from so many perspectives.
It's this mythological story of these twin sisters who are conjoined at the back. They're conjoined at their spine, and they are demigods, goddesses. It's not, those categories aren't as cut and dry in Polynesian mythology. And they are tasked with taking the knowledge of tattoo from Fiji to Samoa. And so, but they are told very strictly, there's a very important, here's the technology, here's how you do it. And there's one very important rule. You only tattoo women, never men. Men are not allowed to get tattoos. And then they start swimming to Samoa from Fiji. And along the way, there's all these adventures. They meet a giant clam. They try to dive down to the giant clam, and a huge tidal wave, whether or not the giant clam is evil or if it's just a coincidence, there's different versions. And a huge wave breaks them apart. And so for the first time, they're seeing each other's faces. They've been back to back their whole life. They're seeing each other's faces. They continue to swim. And they arrive in Samoa, but the whole, seeing each other and almost drowning in giant clam incident has mixed up this song in their head. They were singing a song to remind themselves, only tattoo women, never men. And when they arrive, they tell them, here's the most important rule. You only tattoo men, not women. And they teach everyone in Samoa tattoo. And for many generations, tattoo in Samoa is only for men, not for women. Now, this story blows my mind because it's a story about how that is wrong.
Right.
It's a story about we screwed up and you weren't supposed to be doing this, but that's why men get tattoos and women don't.
Right.
If this is the origin story and you know it's wrong, why are you still doing it that way, right? It's so fascinating. So is it actually a story? It's the origin story of tattoo, but is it actually an origin story of patriarchy? Is it actually an origin story of
that we're living in a world upside down? Yeah, that we're living in
once
the wrong
you get
world.
stuck in and once you get stuck in the wrong loop, you can't get out of it. What's the message of this story? What a weird story to enshrine at the center of your society. It's so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And they now do tattoo women, too.
Right.
But it was a long time that they did that.
How long did it take? Long time.
Yeah. Hundreds of years.
Wow. Yes, I love that. I love that story so much. I was like, oh, this is amazing. Because I don't think I knew much about these goddesses. So I was like, wow, this is an interesting ideal and as well as a change of history. You're like, well, whoops.
That myth served as a useful shorthand for the rest of the book, too, because then we could just say, this is a tattoo the men society. And then, all that implies, like, okay, so this is a patriarchy that's sort of maybe on accident or upside down world. Yeah.
This was a whoopsie, but we're still in it.
We're still in it.
Yeah, it might even know it's doing it wrong, but it keeps doing it.
Yeah. Right. This is the lesson we have yet to learn. But one day, maybe. Oh, gosh. I love this so much. I love these conversations. And you already kind of hinted at it, and you already said you told us secret, so I won't push too much to put it on mic, on record. But are there any other projects or even extensions to this book that you have planned for the future?
We have another book coming out in October. Me Hearties.
Ooh,
that's what I can say.
Well,
a certain kind of life for me.
Yes, yes, that you've been wanting to do since childhood, which I'm very excited about.
Our family is fully obsessed with pirates. I don't think there's ever been a Halloween when one member of the extended family has not been a pirate for Halloween.
I love this. Okay. Just putting that down.
I already have my costume
book.
For book signings.
You know, even before you said Halloween, I was like, it's coming out in October.
Right.
There better be costume opportunities.
Yeah. My husband teases me that like the majority of what I do is just excuses to buy new costumes. Yeah.
The pictures.
And he's not wrong.
You should have seen her at the Toilets book signings where...
that was a whole different... Okay.
Oh, yeah. She
I'll let
had
you finish that sentence.
Giant
I have a poop hat
emoji hat. It's humongous.
It's amazing.
It's fitting.
I just like to set the tone from the beginning, like let people know what is happening.
What they're walking into.
You know, walk in looking regular and then dramatically pull the poop hat out from the podium and put it on and go, we're talking about poop today. And, if parents are going to get upset, I want them to leave early. So
they wouldn't have brought a kid to that event.
Yeah,
anyway.
I don't think they would have. But
really?
And the kids always absolutely freak out and love it. It's really
I was going to say,
I almost
feel like
bought
this
a
is
poop
their
emoji
thing.
dress, but that felt like, I don't know, that felt like
That
was
too
pushing
far.
Yeah.
I kind of regret it. I should have bought the poop
you should do
emoji
it.
dress.
It's not too late.
Yeah.
You don't want regrets.
I know, especially
Live
not
your
poop
life.
emoji dress regrets. That's
I
the
know.
worst
Yeah.
guy.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Well, okay. Pivoting from the book, what about the podcast? Is there any plans you have for the future of it? Anything you're excited about?
One of the things that has emerged from the podcast over the years, which has been a surprise, but is something that I'm really loving, is that we're doing a lot of podcast-based women's history tours. And just listeners will sign up to come with us on, 1 or 2 week adventures all over, just visiting the locations where we've recorded previous episodes, meet the guests that have been on previous episodes. And I think we're gonna keep doing those because it's so much fun, and it's so the self-selecting group, the kind of people who sign up for.
I was going to say, these are very nerdy tours.
Very, like if we say, hey, would you like to go to a place nobody's ever heard of, to visit locations associated with historical women that nobody knows about? Yeah. I mean, this is zero bragging rights. This is not your typical tour. And for the kind of people who say, yes, sign me up for that, please. It's been wonderful. It's been so great. So we've been doing that for years.
They're all the best people in the world. Yeah.
Oh, it's so, and just sort of turns into instant travel families. And most people sign up solo also. So I appreciate the courageous leap that they take. Like, I'm signing up for this. This might be the worst thing ever. But so far, I don't know how many we've done so far, like 10? I haven't counted, maybe more.
Yeah.
And every time it's magic, every single time. And it's just strangers from across the world who just come together for this grand adventure in women's history.
And then stay friends. I mean, the WhatsApp group from tours from 3 years ago are still going. Like, people are visiting each other independently. And I think the best
history travel is just bonding.
Yeah. And I think the best, the best proof that, again, there's an appetite for this and that we're doing something right on them is that people keep coming back. We have people who've come over and over. I think one woman has come on 6 tours.
I'm going to taste that women's history.
You got it.
Yeah, like 3/4. We open a tour now and like 3/4 of it fills up with just people who've already been on a tour. It's like, here's the regulars, and then there's 3 slots left for new people.
Yeah.
So
that's
really
the test
fun.
of a good travel partner. Like that, that says a lot. You can travel with someone and enjoy it enough to go again.
Yes.
That says a lot about you as
Yes.
a crew. So that's
the
amazing.
ultimate test of a relationship.
So y'all are about to head to Greece, right?
Yes, we're heading to
my
Greece in April, Savannah in September, Boston in October. I think next year we'll do Italy.
Wait, you're coming down to Savannah?
Yeah. Yes.
Maybe we need to meet up with y'all.
Are you in Savannah?
We're in
We're in
Atlanta.
Atlanta.
We're not
okay.
that far.
Okay.
You should.
Yep. We definitely need to.
My husband's in Atlanta all the time. I need to just come and hang out with you.
Wait, you are?
Yeah, my husband is there all the time, and I keep saying, I've got to,
Olivia never.
I got to go along.
You need to go.
I know.
But okay, so we're going to put that down in our calendar, Savannah. All right.
Yeah.
I said it imaginary. Yeah, yes, I love that.
And these are like super boutique curated. There's no travel agents involved. This is Katie and her husband, Mark, who has been dubbed the smoothness operator, whose job is to just keep everything running perfectly smoothly, solve all the problems. And these are
the
just
trip servants. Yeah.
Super. Yeah. These are super, super individualized,
unique,
precisely organized. Yeah. This is not just, oh, yeah, we'll tag along on a pre-organized tour. Nope. These
the
are
opposite of that.
What's Her Name tours.
I love it.
Yeah.
You might find us on your next tour.
Be like,
"Hi."
sneaking in the back.
Yeah.
Man, had we known about this earlier?
But honestly, just the people. Yeah, the people who, it's really about the people. It's about the places we go and that you get to meet the guests from the episode. And that's always so cool. We do a lot of like book signing with the guests, and like we'll do a lot of like, we have this historic house to ourselves as the group. And we just get to go around Caroline Herschel's house and just, freak out and touch everything. And
VIP.
Because the people who run those places are so excited that someone's excited, right?
Yeah,
when we walk in and they're like, how do you, they'll show some artifact so many times. They're like, and here's the blah, 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 blah. And you can see they're just running their spiel. And the whole group will go, oh! You can see them kind of recalibrate for a second and go, oh,
you actually know.
Oh,
these people care.
And then suddenly it's a completely different tour. And they're, we get every exciting detail. And they're like, oh, and look at this. And let me pull this out of storage. And it's so fun.
It's so fun. Yeah, they're so great. So I think we'll keep doing that.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yes. That sounds so lovely. Also, just thank you so much for, we talk about here all the time when people bring up these stories that we didn't know about and how important it is and how it's amazing that people are still doing this work, and sometimes they're kind of ignored for a long time. But so thanks to you and to all the researchers and academics who have come to you and been like, no, actually, I know a lot about this and we should be talking about this person. That's amazing.
Yes, exactly. That's what, and at the opening of the book, we said, a book like ours is only possible because literally hundreds, if not thousands of people are out there excavating these stories all over the world. Everybody is working collectively. And now, after a decade of that, the fruits of everyone's labor is so inspiring. It's just incredible how much has been done just in the last 10 years. So, amen. Thank you, everybody who has been uncovering these stories all these years. It's amazing what we found. Even though we knew we were going to find amazing stuff, it's surprising every time, everything that gets unearthed.
Absolutely. And one story that keeps coming up that it's now getting to the point where I have to believe it, is how many people have some version of, I was working on this other project, and then this dead woman tackled me in the library. Like this book. One was literally the book fell out of the shelf as she was walking past. Like this story just like came out of nowhere, grabbed me, wouldn't let me go. She insisted that I tell her story, and I think it feels like these women are going, it is now my turn. The time has come. We're coming back. And they've, found enough trained and willing people to tell those stories now, because it's so wild how often that exact story comes up of, I was working on this, and then completely derailed into this thing instead.
Yes. Yes.
Just go pick up random books in the library, folks, and start looking, because
Lots of libraries.
Feel the vibe as you walk down the aisle. Is there someone here who wants to talk to me?
Oh, I love that.
It's seance based.
Seance academia. Yeah.
Oh, I like that. I want that on a t-shirt. Seance academia.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. This has been a delight. Hopefully we can do this again, maybe IRL. Who
Yes.
knows?
Yep.
In
See
the
you in September.
future.
Savannah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, until then, where can the good listeners find you?
What's her name?
Everywhere.
Podcast.com. Yeah, we're on every podcast platform. And the books you can get everywhere. We have links on our website also. If you want to support indie bookshops on bookshop.org, local indie bookshops, we've got all the books on there.
We will also very soon have signed copies available on our website if people want to buy signed copies directly from us of the 80 Lost Women book. So they can find those there too, and we'll even personalize it for you if you tell us what you want. And it's in a whole bunch of countries and a whole bunch of languages. Our books have been published in, I think it's 9 languages now, which is mind-blowing.
The Stinky History of Toilets is the most translated. Yeah.
Yes.
Slovak, Vietnamese, Polish.
Delightful. Poop is universal. That's the one truth
Everybody poops.
that we know.
But the idea that a small child in Slovakia is going to be reading my book about poop blows my mind.
Beautiful.
It's a beautiful world.
It is. Well, thank you both so much for being here and for such a delightful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Listeners, if you would like to contact us, you can. You can email us at hello@stuffmonevertoldyou.com. You can find us on Blue Sky at Mom Stuff Podcast or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff One Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have a TeePublic store and we have a book you can get where you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer Christina, our executive producer Maya, and our contributor Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff One Never Told You is a production by iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.